Hey, welcome back. This is Chance Shirley,
And this is Chris Vander.
and we are watching we're getting into the finale of George Romero's Night of the Living Dead.
We're sitting here watching them watch something else.
Yeah, and actually, if you're watching this, then you're watching us watch them watch something else, which is pretty mind-blowing now that I'm thinking about it.
If we add one more level to that, it becomes a Charlie Kaufman movie.
Yeah. You know, you remember
Synecdoche?
but that's the name of the state, the city. Do you remember the movie or is
Yeah.
it
The city is Schenectady, and the movie is Synecdoche.
That's how you say it, Synecdoche. And a Synecdoche is a small thing. Is that how it works? It's a small thing that also is a big thing?
I don't completely understand the definition. I think that it's something that represents a larger thing. Like if you say, I don't know how you say it. Like you say, the jerseys are on the field. You're saying jersey meaning the jerseys the people are wearing, but you're actually technically talking about the people wearing the jerseys. I think that's what it means. It's like an individual piece of something that represents a whole of something.
Yeah, and not the reason that I said that when you mentioned Charlie Kaufman was I was thinking about that word and how I don't completely understand it. But Night of the Living, is Night of the Living Dead all zombie movies, and are all zombie movies like Night of the Living Dead? I feel I feel like that's kind of a thing.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I feel like first of all, any good, how would you say, any honest, good zombie film will admit to the debt of gratitude that it owes this film, because even if it's ripping off of a different film, that film ripped off of this film.
It's like the Night of the Living Dead is like the Beatles of zombie cinema.
Right, exactly. So
Even if that band you love, you don't realize, even if all the bands that influenced your band were not the Beatles, if you go back far enough in those bands that did influence you, you will end up at the Beatles at some point.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they are the progenitor, and that's definitely the case with this film. So I think we're finally heading into the well, not finally. I've been enjoying the rest of the movie, but we're heading into the point at which we've gathered our entire group now. We know everybody who's here. There's no more surprises to be found within. Now the question is, we are all up to date information-wise. We just saw what's going on TV. Clearly, people aren't in control. How do we live through this? What's our solution? And this is really where the divisions start to come in, where the group is divided by what they want to do. And I feel like that's one of the big messages Romero has is the intent that people's desire for their individual survival oftentimes will put them and their loved ones more at risk than thinking about everyone as a whole.
Yeah. I was just kind of wrapped up watching.
I was just going to say, it gets sucked in easily.
and your point, as is one of the themes of our watch today, is as timely now as it was in 1968, and maybe even more timely now.
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the things that I found most disturbing in watching movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, especially dystopian sci-fi or horror films, is that what they imagined as a horrifying future is kind of our present. They are not too far off.
I saw a great sign somebody had taken a picture of at a bookstore. It said it was like how did they say it? The post-apocalyptic fiction section has been moved to, all those books have been moved to current events.
Yeah, it's disturbing when something goes from speculative fiction to nonfiction.
Yeah, my wife and I. I wonder if we're naively planning for retirement given the state of the world. But my shorthand for what if our retirement plans go awry is, what if we're out fighting mutants on Fury Road, and Thunderdoming everybody. I guess that when I think that when and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but when you watch something like this, or another dystopian type movie from the 60s or 70s, there's obviously a warning aspect to it, and but it seems like that maybe there's a little bit of optimism, like, look, this is not the road that you want to go down, but however, you don't have to go down this road. You, the audience, you can what did they say in Terminator? There is no fate but what we make. There's maybe a little optimism hidden underneath all the doom and gloom that in the real world, we'll make better decisions and we won't go down this road. But yeah, as I get older, it doesn't seem that society is learning those lessons.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, that's the horrible irony, right? Is that they saw it as a cautionary tale, and it's clearly one we didn't listen to.
Yeah, and that gets back to Fury Road. The stuff where the old women in that movie were, and I'm not using that term dismissively. There was like a cadre of old women, and they were obviously the old wise women, and they were what was it? Man killed the world. Was that their little saying? It was really brief and it was really brief and to the point, and obviously the people watching that movie, instead of taking away that crazy stunt races are cool, the real takeaway would be take care of each other and take care of the planet. And yeah, it just doesn't seem like we're doing that. This has turned into a really heavy episode of other people's movies, Chris.
Yeah. I'm really glad we picked this film and then decided to, I don't know, get drunk and cry.
We'll have to.
But I mean,
next time we'll have to find something goofier and sillier to watch.
Oh yeah, well for sure. I mean, I feel like it's, while obviously we're getting into some heavy subject matter, it's kind of difficult to talk about almost any Romero movie, but particularly this one, and not sort of reckon with that. So much of this movie is about staring into the face of something that nobody really wants to think about. I mean, this ending, I can't even imagine audiences of the day watching the end of this movie, what that experience was like, walking away. And I don't want to go into it yet until we get there, but like I'm trying to think of what was your average, 1968, we're only a handful of years from, Mary Poppins being the most popular film of the year. And then this comes out. Like, I think about that and I think, like, audiences couldn't have been prepared for this.
Well, which kind of reminds me of another one of the great all-time downer movie endings, and it might have been the same year, give or take, the original Planet of the Apes, the Charlton Heston movie. Mm-hmm. Again, epically brutal downer ending, but I think this one, and they're both great endings. The endings of Planet of the Apes feels big and blockbustery, and whoa, dude, what a huge epic scale downer, and this one is just feels so personal,
Yeah. There's also some sense of resignation in this one that there isn't that one. Like, Charlton Heston is disappointed, obviously, in the revelation he finds at the end, but Charlton Heston is still alive, and he's an action star, right? And so you could at least walk away thinking, he's bummed out, but he's going to pick himself up and dust himself off. And
society has made huge mistakes, but the hero, as the individual, lives on in that movie.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely.
And here, it's totally erased, and all we're left with is that indifferent society, and it just it's such a brutal realization,
Yeah. And we should really, like I said, this is a great set piece. We should really pay. Oh, see, squib. Oh, I love good squib work. And the pyro that gets going toward the end of this thing is really something to see.
The depth of framing in this shot is in this sequence is fantastic too. One of the things he plays with a lot is if he gets he'll get a figure really close in the foreground and then light them only from the other side, so they're entirely in silhouette and they're basically just blocking out an entire chunk of the frame. And there's something so evocative about that because it's literally just the shape of a human but with nothing behind it that is sort of the perfect symbol for what these creatures are, which is just an empty vessel with nothing within it. And I think it was such a brilliant visual representation of what he was telling us about these things. And here's some of that canned music that you don't notice sounds like could be a cue from a Western, but it really does. It has the same vibe as a Mike Hammer film. You could hear that score in that, and it wouldn't feel all that different. But because you're so intent in the story here, you're so focused, it doesn't stand out to you at all.
Shooting the lock off of gas. That's so.
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I love that. That the mistake was him splashing gas on the truck and not
blowing
Ben
up.
Firing a gun at it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. Yeah, the way this scene devolves into chaos reminds me of the stuff that I don't know if you've watched many of Sidney Lumet's movies, but he was always really good at taking a scene where everything should be fairly straightforward and just in 5 minutes everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and everything is just in chaos.
Yeah, no, I'm an enormous Lumet fan. Someday, when we have the money and the wherewithal, we'll do a marathon of commentaries about his work, because I feel like if most of his films hadn't been about blue-collar people, he would be considered an auteur. But because so many of his movies are about working-class people, they don't recognize the level of artistry in his stories.
Oh
man, look at that explosion.
That's... I think there was a bit of a cheat in there with like one white frame,
Yeah.
But that being said, I'd love to have an explosion that good in one of my movies. I wanted to call attention to it a little bit earlier, just as far as the cinematography goes. There were a couple of scenes where they were approaching one of the good things about black and white is it makes it a little easier to cheat day for night. And I don't think they were doing day for night earlier, but there were a couple of shots where you could still see that there was sky in the background. It wasn't completely black behind them,
right. And
the torches still looked bright like torches. So I think they must have done some late afternoon for night trickery in there. Now this is just dark with the lights that they've got are there, and that's pretty much just pitch night. But
yeah.
They really got some nice mileage out of those late afternoon shots they snuck in there. They gave it gives you shooting at night when everything is just black can be kind of, it's just sometimes it can be like not cinematic, because if you're standing in the woods and you can't see anything. There was a big controversy about some Game of Thrones stuff from one of the last episodes where they shot this night battle and it was so underlit nobody could tell if their TV was still on, And on working on low budgets without a lot of lighting gear, shooting at night can kind of turn into that if you're not careful. But they did some smart tricks in this to stay away from that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it happens to the best of us, right? I mean, I know there was a point at which I think David Fincher was having a hard time when he was shooting Panic Room, because most of the movie takes place in a house where there are no lights. They've been, smashed out. And, there was a point at which...
You basically have to cheat and pretend that like moonlight or something is coming in through the window.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I remember hearing, maybe it's apocryphal, but I feel like I remember hearing, like they were watching dailies early on in the shoot, and they were like, there are shots where you can't see anything except for a glint of light off of, Forrest Whitaker's bald head. Like, we can't put that out in a theater,
That might be why I know that Fincher is a big digital fan. That might be why he wanted to make the move to digital before a lot of filmmakers, is because if you're really going to be working at the edge of exposure like that, it's nice if you can see immediately what you're getting, which you can do with video, and of course with film, if you shoot film, then you have to send it to the lab, and at best case you get it back next day, but a lot of times you have to wait a couple of days for it. So if you're working in really extreme situations, very bright light or no light at all, it's probably good to be able to check your work as you go, as opposed to getting 2 days later and then realizing you didn't expose anything.
Right. So this is I think they said they went maybe to a butcher shop or something to get all of these pieces that not the parts that look like hands, but the other pieces, just like skin and viscera. They went and bought that. And
So that's actual meat. That's actual meat.
some of it is actual meat, yeah.
Oh
And in
my
fact, I guess they
gosh.
said some of the people were brave enough to go biting into it, but a lot of them would do that effect where they would sort of turn their head as they bit, so you couldn't see that they weren't actually biting anything out of it.
Just handling raw meat makes me terrified.
Yeah. So I don't want to go without mentioning my favorite sequence of the film, which happened a couple minutes ago, which is when Ben gets back into the house and then just knocks Harry on the ground because he wasn't willing to open the door for him. I love that moment. And then we have sort of the calm before the rest of the storm, where I feel like there's always a moment where in a horror film where we have some party or parties that die in some spectacularly tragic way, and then there's that quiet moment where everybody has to kind of take it in. And I love in that moment where everybody else is sort of quiet is when she actually kind of starts talking again. The one that has basically been mute for the whole film, she kind of finds her voice again for a minute.
Yeah, I've really got to sit down and watch this movie again without talking over it, and pay attention to all these great little plot points and motifs that you've reminded me of, that or introduced me to the first time. I mean, I knew that this was a paranoid, maybe not paranoid, a claustrophobic movie by nature, but I had never really thought how he's turning the screws the whole time. How it actually doesn't start that way. It slowly kind of creeps in on you.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the worst things that can happen with a chamber piece is you start inside a room and then you're already claustrophobic. You have to get used to it, and then you've lost the power of it by the time you're trying to utilize that at the end. You'll see movies that are based on plays and you really feel the staginess of it. But in this movie, they very cleverly found a way, because they had the property around them as well, to let it continue to breathe until it was just impossible. Oh, see, yeah, this is really the scene that helps me to connect with Barbara's character, where she's clearly so gone. She's still talking about her brother, even though we saw her witness what happened to him. She has to know to some degree that he's at least unconscious and dead, if not one of these things. And yet it doesn't permeate for her. It's not only a great performance, but like the insinuation psychologically of what's going on with her is pretty fantastic. And I should also mention, it happened quite a while ago, but I think there's just something hilariously, like it's almost as if George Romero was saying, this is your typical American. There's a sequence where Dwayne Jones walks into the room and he's literally just got a television with a gun stacked on top of it. And I'm like, man, that is an ultra American entrance right there. This framing is fantastic too. I love this, the depth of frame. He's up close to the television and we've got people basically in 4 different depths behind him. A lot of shots, actually we were just talking about Lumet, you see a lot of shots like that in 12 Angry Men too, because he's got 5, 6, 7 people in a shot and he's only got one room to do it. So the way he layers them is really effective.
Yeah, I keep getting the big pitfall with doing commentaries for fun movies is it's I keep getting wrapped up watching the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in particular, this sequence too, because it's such an iconic. Like when people talk about this movie, one of the things they always remember is the regular American folks, the sheriffs, the militia, all out with their guns, just walking. And in some ways, it's maybe the most haunting image in this film because. Though I don't think Romero necessarily, in the day, I don't think it was as big an issue as it is now. Obviously, the issue of guns and their use in the public arena, in the public sphere. But watching this now, and we're literally days or weeks out from some guy who walked into a Walmart with a gun on him, not intending to shoot anybody, but just because he wanted to see how far he could stretch his right to bear arms. And then you see a shot like this with just 40 men. Armed to the teeth.
Armed to the teeth, yeah.
And you think about the idea that, obviously in this world, you need the weapons to take them down. But you think about, these are not deputized men. Those are people who just had those weapons sitting in their house just for such an event to take place,
Though, zombie apocalypse is a better argument for a super loose Second Amendment than anything else I can think of. So
Yeah,
I got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like if you were going to make an argument, this is the one to make. It's, as opposed to what if the government comes for whatever. My argument would be, what if the undead comes?
Yeah. If the government comes for whatever, then you've got problems because they've got tanks and fighter jets. If the zombies are coming for you, then the guns probably are a pretty good equalizer at that point.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Guns are really only going to help you in that circumstance.
It was fun. The MythBusters guys. I don't know if you've ever watched the MythBusters show, but
Sure.
one of the problems that people sometimes have with zombie movies is, especially in the traditional Romero style zombies, it's like they're dumb and they're slow. What are you worried about? So the theory that the MythBusters were testing was, well, it's not the individual zombie you have to worry about. It's the horde. It's just the sheer numbers of them. And so the experiment they did a couple of different things basically where I think one, they used a paintball gun, and so one of the guys was playing the human, and they had a bunch of extras basically trying to get in and touch the human. It was an elaborate game of tag, and if you got shot with a paintball gun as a zombie, you had to stop attacking. And I think they had set him up behind a fence with like a gate, so there was a bit of a bottleneck, but it wasn't it wasn't an impossible bottleneck. And sure enough, he was able to shoot 30 or so quote unquote zombies, but eventually somebody tagged him. And then they did the test again, but they did it with an axe, he was just using a stick. And basically, if I touch you with the stick, then you're out. But if you touch me, then I'm out. And come to find out, because you don't have to reload a stick, the stick was actually more effective at fighting off a horde of zombies than the gun was. That being said, even the stick was not sufficient to deal with more than. At some point, if it's one person in a relatively tight space with 150 zombies, it doesn't matter how dumb or slow they are, you're still going to get overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah. It's a numbers game. At some point, the numbers will overcome you.
Which is kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah, perfectly timed conversation. Yeah, for me, this is the real nightmare sequence, because I don't know, maybe I'm in the minority on this, but I am much more frightened when I'm inside of a place that zombies are coming at than when I'm out in the open. There's something about the idea of always being able to run somewhere.
Sure.
That is appealing to me. That's one of the reasons why, and I feel like maybe I connect with Ben in that, because he doesn't want to go into the basement. And ultimately, this film does posit that the basement is the safer place. But there's something to me about knowing that there's basically only 4 holes I can get out of in this box, and they're all surrounded right now. Yeah. Whereas if I'm in a stretch of land, there's no holes to be dealt with. It's just wide open space.
Though that being said, if there are, it depends on the size of the horde. If imagine you're on a football field and there's 11 slow players chasing you, you're probably going to be okay. If you're on a football field and there's 100 of them, you're probably going to have trouble. At some point. At some point, they could truly surround you. If there's enough of them, they could basically form an impenetrable wall.
Yeah. Well, it's why the zombie film is some people's favorite monster, because it ultimately operates. I don't want to say in logic, but logically that's how it works. If there were this many creatures of any kind coming after you, eventually they would get you. There's never a movie with a horde of vampires or a horde of werewolves. And the other thing I love about zombie movies, as opposed to vampires or werewolves or all those, is those monsters exist in the darkness. The world doesn't believe that they're real. In every zombie movie, everyone believes in the zombies because they're everywhere. So it's really kind of one of the only monsters that does take place entirely in daylight, that everyone believes in and everyone deals with. So I think there's something interesting about that, the unity of the survivors in all being aware that they're up against the same insurmountable task. And then here's the revelation of the one zombie that's been on the inside. And now we finally understand that it's not just bodies rising from the dead, but that it could be people who were already alive that die and then come back. That's sort of the first, I think this is really the first inkling that we get of that in this moment.
So this is a great scene. I'm going to guess maybe inspired a little bit by Psycho.
Well, even from the soundtrack, it sounds a little bit like they were, playing against that. Yeah, and so this is the point at which, for me, this is the point where uh, Barbara's character, she's done. This is where she breaks, because not only do we see in this moment Bill Heinzman, the first zombie we saw, the first one that attacked her and sort of put her in this state, but then in just a moment when the door comes down, then there he is.
That's so great. That is
and I love
he's still got the gloves
glasses.
on.
Yep, exactly. They show the glove. I feel like because the glasses are missing, and they want us to make sure that we recognize him. So he reaches up into the door frame with the glove. But yeah, the moment at which she sees her brother moving but not alive, I feel like she's done psychologically, and so it was only a matter of seconds before she was going to be done physically.
Yeah. That's such. This movie. Like this movie, legacy aside, man, it's just a tight suspense, feature. Now we're and speaking of evil little zombie girl, I wanted to mention one of the, there are a few things that I don't usually think about zombies as tool users. Though in this movie it actually happens twice. The first zombie picks up the rock to get into the car with.
Yeah.
Which we didn't mention earlier, and then the little zombie girl picking up the I guess that's a little gardening tool to use as a weapon.
Right. What's happening there? Look, he's holding one too.
Yeah. And I think as what we think of as the Romero modern zombie movie evolved, it seems like that zombies got even, for the most part, even dumber. There were, and less prone to using tools and stuff. There were, I guess, the funny zombies in, is it Return of the Living Dead, where they get where they can talk a little bit and they get on the CB and send more cops. There's some good gags like that.
Yeah. Well, and in this one earlier, I think, didn't they picked up rocks to smash out the headlights because they didn't like the lights that were streaming as well.
Yeah. So there's a lot of the zombie evolution has kind of, since this movie at Ground Zero, has kind of gone in both directions. In some sense, the zombies that we have now are even more primitive or less. I don't know if intelligence is the right word when you're talking. Maybe less dexterous. Maybe maybe their thumbs don't work as good as they used to.
Well, what's interesting though is Romero. It seems like Romero always intended that would be the ultimate revelation, is the evolution of them, though, because in Day of the Dead they were teaching them to use weapons. Eventually, Bub used a gun.
That's
and
right.
in Land of the Dead, that was the whole thing, right? The whole point was that Big Daddy eventually learned not only how to use weapons but how to lead a group. He was the one that realized they could cross the river. So it's interesting because Romero, it seems like, always felt like zombies weren't so much the end of humanity as they were sort of the next step in some sort of evolutionary change.
Which gets us right back to I Am Legend. The great revelation, and spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen or hasn't read I Am Legend. The great revelation about I Am Legend is this guy spends his whole movie trying to kill these quote unquote monsters, and at the end of the story, he realizes that he's the monster. Because basically the world has moved on. Everybody in I Am Legend world is a vampire now, and so he's the boogeyman that the vampire people will tell their children about, for horror stories.
Right. Yeah, and they've now created a society, and he's the outsider in their society as opposed to the other way around. So, yeah, and it's one of those great endings that I wish none of the movies really did that justice. None of the adaptations have really captured that ending in a way that's one, accurate, or two, as powerful as the way that it works out in the book.
I feel like that in the Vincent Price movie, and maybe it was just more insinuated than obvious that, because, well, I don't know. I'll have to at least rewatch the endings of all those movies again. I remember the Will Smith movie kind of felt very Hollywood, and don't get me started. But yeah.
Another beautiful wide open shot here, by the way. It opens up the claustrophobia at the end here. That shot is unbelievable. That wide shot with all of the people walking through the field. So I didn't mean to interrupt you. I love that shot.
And the helicopter, can't imagine that was easy to pull off on a low budget.
Yeah, I wonder he maybe called in one of his newsman friends to get a favor.
Does that say KOV? I bet he did. I bet he
Yeah.
did. Another reason that that I always assumed that Romero was an incredibly nice guy is because obviously anybody that can get this kind of crew together to make a movie with basically no budget, they've got to have some charm.
Right, yeah.
You don't make a movie like this after you've angered like half of the people in your town. I think that that you have to be on pretty good terms with everybody to be able to pull that off.
Yeah. Now, this is the second time in the film that they've done this, which is to just basically leave the main characters. The first one was when they went into the basement with characters we'd only known for 5 minutes. Now we're following an entire scene from people we've only seen in a small clip on television.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because it's kind of jarring because when you think about it as an audience member, you saw that attack, you saw most everybody die, you don't know what happened to Ben, and now we're just with these guys. It's very conceivable what the movie is saying is that they're all dead and this is what's left now, so whoever these guys are. And that's a pretty daring 5 minutes of screen time, although arguably the next 5 minutes of screen time is far more daring.
Yeah.
Yeah, God, this performance is so fantastic. He's so broken,
So I know that you're more familiar with the the cast and their careers than I am. Do you know what Jones did? Did he do any other work after this one? It seems like maybe he had some. Did he at least have some cameos in some of Romero's later movies, or am I remembering that wrong?
I don't remember him from other Romero movies. There is one other film, one other fantastic film that should be seen if you like Dwayne Jones. It's a film called Ganja and Hess.
Oh my gosh, I know that movie's reputation. I didn't realize that he was in it. Is he one of the leads?
Yeah, he plays the lead. Yeah, he plays the one of the
Holy moly.
what do you call it, archaeologist, scientist.
Yeah, now I've got to check that out. Yeah.
Yeah, he's great. That was on Shudder for a while too, and it's covered to a degree in the documentary Horror Noir as well.
Yeah. That's where I'd heard about it. Well, I'd actually read about it. Spike Lee, I think, did a remake of it at one point.
Right. Yeah, he did. The Sweet Blood of Jesus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So,
but I would imagine Dwayne Jones probably looms large within the history of black actors in horror because of those two films
those
combined.
2 movies, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then it's amazing because now you can see this coming. You almost expect it in a sad way, but like in the day, not only did you not expect it because that kind of stuff didn't happen in movies,
Like you say, one of the great optimistic things about movies like this is, hey, we've got a bigger problem than our petty prejudices. Let's put all that aside and fight the real enemy. And at this point in the movie, we might think that that's actually how it's going to play out. But yeah, when you look at the fact that every one of these dudes is white, and then there's one person of color, and of course, they're assuming he's a zombie, but the what do they call it? The optics of that paint a damning picture of America.
Yeah, well, and also I feel like it's possible that they did think, at least one of them thought it was, but we also saw where he clearly was raising the gun and pointing it out the door. So were they shooting him because they thought he was a zombie? Were they shooting him because they thought they were going to get shot? Or were they shooting him because they could see he was a black guy? Because look at the way that they're treating the bodies in this final sort of montage sequence is so disturbing, not because what they're doing to bodies, but because we recognize some of this iconography from pictures of Klan rallies, of people getting lynched. Like, these are images that are not far off from a reality that was a very real reality at the time that this movie came out.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, I feel like that regardless of the characters, the characters that shot Ben, regardless of their motivation, I think the subtext of that is really heavy. You know what I mean? There's, and I don't even know if I'd be curious, and I'm sure that he has talked about this in interviews. I'd be curious what Romero do you know what Romero said about the ending? Obviously, the ending, we give it a lot of weight because of the way the movie was cast and the the way that America was and is. But has Romero ever said that he, you know, has he ever said what the motivation was for the guys that shot Ben?
Well,
That
I
you
don't
know
think
of?
he addressed it directly. I do remember him saying something once where he said that they shot the ending before the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., but the film was released after it.
Oh,
And so there was a film they made that suddenly was a very different entity than they thought it was when they were producing it.
sure, sure. And again, just just that revolutionary, you know, casting act alone would have made that a strong scene, you know.
Absolutely.
But wow, well that that was an hour and a half that flew right by, man.
We'll have to do this again on maybe on Last Man on Earth, since it's so closely related.
Oh wow, yeah, that would be a or maybe like I said, it might be fun to do something a little. Last Man on Earth is not as heavy as this, but it's still a heavy. It's still a bit of a downer. Have you ever seen They Came from Beyond Space? It's a swinging '60s body snatchers type movie.
I do think I have. I will definitely have to check that out.
Oh my goodness, that's a Mascot favorite and one that would I think be a great candidate for. It might be a nice palate cleanser after watching possibly the heaviest movie that we have in rotation.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, tell you what, since our good viewers at home are now just staring at a blank screen, let's wrap up and we will do this again sometime. Though you have been watching, viewers at home, you have been watching other people's movies with me, Chance Shirley, with my good friend and Mascot contributor Chris Vander. And Chris, have you got anything you'd like to leave on?
I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation, and you always know how to contact us if you want more of it. We love providing it, so as long as we know that you guys are enjoying it, that's what matters to us.
Yeah. You can find out how to tweet us or email us or what have you. We're always online at mascottv.net. You guys have a good night, and we'll see you next time on Other People's Movies.